So, words and phrases that need to stop. Coming right up. What's up, y'all? Welcome back to Common Sense Logic Reason. And always, I want to say thank y'all for joining me today. So when I say words that need to stop and phrases that needs to stop, I don't mean we need to end words, get rid of words. I'm not into 1984 level style of removing the words. And of course, that's from George Orwell's book. But the left, though, sometimes they just take words out of context. They create these words, they use buzzwords. And the reason why they do this, as I've said so many times, is that they have to, because they can't rely on facts and evidence and data to prove their point. Very rarely can they do this. So they have to rely on other means, and this is creating buzzwords. So I'm going to start with the words, and then I'm going to go into the phrases. Now, the first word that needs to stop being used, taken out of context, is triggered. We know this is a leftist buzzword. This is one that they've been using for a while, and specifically, you see more women doing this. So I guess you could say it's a feminist thing. But anytime someone brings forward a point that they can't argue against, and they get mad and they get triggered, or someone does something they don't like, they act in a way that they don't like, or people have a viewpoint they don't like, they're triggered. Okay, you can be triggered up the wazoo if you want to be, but being triggered or not liking what I like or not liking my viewpoint doesn't mean that you have the right to tell me that I have to change mine. If you're going to be triggered, you're just going to be triggered, and that's all it is. But the truth is the truth. It doesn't matter. And I always say, if they're triggered now, then what are they going to do when Jesus returns? Now the next word that really needs to stop is intimidated. This is something that you hear from women. Anytime a man doesn't want to deal with a certain type of woman for whatever reason, and he decides not to deal with them, he's triggered. Not triggered, intimidated. That just go to show you how ridiculously overused the word triggered is. But they bring up this word intimidated. So if a man says he doesn't like a boss chick, so he doesn't deal with boss chicks, well, he's intimidated by her. If a woman makes a high salary, and as a result of making a high salary has a ridiculous attitude, and men say, well, I don't want to deal with that attitude, I'm not gonna, they'll say, well, you're intimidated. If a man says, I'm not interested in your money, because men are not interested in money the way women are. A man don't care about money. Look, you could be a man who's a millionaire, a man who's living in his mama's house. He doesn't care about a woman's money. That's just something that men are not attracted to in women. So if a man says he doesn't care about a woman's money, they'll say he's intimidated by me. Well, no, a man is not intimidated. That not wanting to deal with something doesn't mean that you're intimidated by it. Again, this is a word that these women are, use against red pill. When red pill men say they won't tolerate something, or we have our preferences. Like I said, we've heard so many red pillers say women can have preferences all day, but as soon as a man has his preferences, they're intimidated. No, it just means that we don't want to deal with something, not intimidated by. Now, the next word that needs to stop is toxic. This is another feminist word, toxic. And this word toxic is usually connected with masculinity. So anytime there's a portion of masculinity that these hardcore feminists don't like, is toxic. Anytime men being men equals to something that's not going to be beneficial to women, they just say it's toxic. Now, they're always talking about toxic masculinity, but it's never toxic femininity or the toxicity that feminists bring. And there is such a thing as toxic. If we're going to say toxic masculinity or bad parts of masculinity, well, there is bad parts of femininity as well. So if you're going to bring up toxic masculinity, which is not toxic, then you need to bring up the toxic femininity. That's how I always say. You got to save the hypocrisy for somebody else. Now, the last word that really needs to stop is misogyny. Again, another feminist buzzword that really means not much at all. Now misogyny is the hate or the mistreatment of women. Well, they take a man just being a man. Anytime it conflicts with what women want, it's misogyny. Again, if a man has preferences in a woman, a man says, I'm not going to tolerate this behavior in a woman, I'm not going to tolerate that, this is what I'm not going to tolerate, it's misogyny. But as I said before, women can have their preferences about what they want in a man all day, right? That's not misandrous. And by the way, misandrous, something that we very rarely hear about, is the opposite of misogyny. It's basically the hate or mistreatment of men. And we have plenty of misandry in society, especially when it comes down to the family courts. I mean, men get absolutely ramrodded when it comes down to family courts. You got all these stupid rules like the rape shield law, where a woman can literally lie on a man and say that a man raped her, and and could destroy a man's life and nothing happens to her, because they'll say, well, it's going to discourage women who were actually raped from coming to the forefront. Of course they need to be discouraged from lying. If you've really been raped by a man, then you should come to the forefront with it. But if you lie on a man, whatever would have happened to that man should happen to the woman who lies. You don't lie on no man. This day and age with modernism, and you can destroy a man's life on a lie. And there have been many men who've had their lives turned upside down and ramrodded, and careers lost because of a lie of a rape allegation. So this buzzword of misogyny needs to stop. Now I'm going to deal with, I have two phrases that really needs to end like yesterday. The first one is, I'm thick. Now, this is a phrase that more often than not is going to be associated with black females, and typically because black men tend to love curvier, shapely women. Now, what men mean by thick is typically a woman, like I said, with their typical hourglass shape, a nice hips to waist ratio, slightly larger hips to waist, and also may be associated with a woman, her thighs may be slightly larger in proportion than the average, right? Now, this is a type of female that a man would say is thick. A perfect example would be Ashley Graham. Now, before she lost the weight, she was a very curvy, shapely woman, and this is why so many men were checking for her. And even after she lost some weight, she still had a curvy shape. But what I found and what I've seen in my life, that typically with a woman with a nice curvy shape, when they gain a little weight, it just becomes more pronounced and more appealing generally to men that love curvier women. That's just what it is. Now, what we don't mean by thick is Lizzo. Unfortunately, a lot of women who are just not curvy, not shapely, but just big as houses, are calling themselves thick to justify their weight. They're not thick. Okay? Gabrielle Sidibe, when she was in Precious, that is not thick at all. That was just big. Although she lost a little weight, but that was not thick. That's just big. So women have to stop using the word thick to make themselves feel better about being just insanely overweight and just horribly built. No hourglass shape at all. They're just big. But like I say, they make themselves feel good, and the world loves making women feel good about their bad behavior. So the context of women using thick out of context, or the idea of them using it out of context, needs to stop. Really and truly. Now, the last phrase that needs to stop is evil patriarchy. Now, this is a phrase, again, associated with feminists, these feminists out here. And it's amazing, Kevin Samuel always said that people can only be feminist in the first world. And men have so civilized the world that women are acting like they don't need men anymore. But the whole concept of evil patriarchy is that, history shows that society has always been patriarchally based on the patriarchy. Men were in charge. Well, I mean, any woman who have a problem with it, these hardcore feminists, if you got a problem with this, I always say, hey, get saved, go to heaven, take it up with Jesus. Go find, when you get to heaven, go find a person that came up with male and female nature, and you take that up with them. Okay, it's just by nature, men tend to lead and women basically tend to follow. So this is how societies have always been structured since people have been on this planet. But since men have always been in charge, now they want to believe that they're in charge now in a society that men have civilized. They want to cry about the evil patriarchy. Well, it's that same evil patriarchy that's built society, that's built this society in which you feel so safe now you can think you don't need men. And that's really truly a first world problem, because you don't hear any feminists in the third world, because they don't have the luxury to cry about evil patriarchy. All right, they don't have the luxury, they don't have the safety to believe that they can get on in society without men. But there is no evil patriarchy. That's just human nature. That's what we've always done. The patriarchy isn't evil. It's just what it is. Now, another thing that Kevin Samuels always used to ask is, these women who make these ridiculous statements, well, give me your best example of a matriarchy. And there is none. There's no example of a matriarchy out here that's ever been successful. Now, all the time, women will resort to finding a patriarchal society in which the woman is the leader, prime minister of, and they'll say, well, what about that? Well, that's not an example of a matriarchy. That's an example of a woman being the highest title in a patriarchal society. That's still a patriarch. Is there an example of a matriarch that we can point to? Yeah. Here in the United States of America, it's called the black community. The black community is a perfect example of a patriarchy and matriarchy, what matriarchies do. You look at any place where you have high rates of single parent households without fathers, you also have all the problems that people complain about that's associated with that. So do you want that for the whole world? Anyway, like I say, these are the phrases that the left, these buzzwords that the left use, and it really needs to stop. And eventually what's going to happen, they're just going to keep pushing, and men are just going to say enough is enough. And like I say, they're getting to this, and these people just don't know when to stop. They don't know when they have a win. Anytime you give them something, you would think, okay, they would say, hey, we got something, so let's live. Let's just go on with society. Now, no, they're never happy. They're always going to find another victimhood, another excuse to be a victim and complain about that. They're constantly finding victims. So if you don't put an end to it, it never stops. Anyway, these are the words and phrases that needs to stop being taken out of context now, because it's just getting ridiculous, y'all. Anyway, this is my 2 cents on it. But anyway, y'all, as always, until next time.